The snow came down like shattered glass, each flake sharp against the dark Chicago sky. The city had gone silent, its noise swallowed by the storm. Only the hum of Adrian Hale's black sedan broke the stillness as it rolled down the empty road, headlights cutting through a curtain of white. Inside, the man behind the wheel looked every bit the part of a billionaire. Tailored coat, gloved hands, an expensive watch glinting faintly against the dashboard light. But beneath that calm precision, his mind was a chaos no storm could match. He'd just walked out of a boardroom war. Deals collapsing, investors panicking, his legacy hanging by a thread. The storm outside felt like a reflection of everything he had built. Powerful, relentless, and completely out of control. For most men, money could buy silence. For Adrian, it only made the noise louder. As he turned onto a narrow stretch of road, a flicker in the corner of his vision made him slow down. There, under the dim buzz of a dying street lamp, stood a child. She was so small she almost disappeared into the snow. Barefoot, her tiny feet buried in the frost. A tattered pink jacket hung from her shoulders, the sleeves far too long. In her trembling hands, she clutched a small, cracked snow globe. Adrian's breath caught. He pulled over without thinking, the tires crunching against the frozen curb. For a moment, he simply watched her through the windshield, unable to move. Something about her stillness, so calm, so heartbreakingly patient, pierced through the numbness he'd carried for years. He lowered the window, cold air flooding the car. "Hey, are you all right?" The little girl flinched but didn't run. Her eyes were wide, glazed with the kind of fear that comes from being let down too many times. Her lips were pale, barely moving as she spoke. "My mom said she'd come back." But she didn't. The words struck him harder than any business failure ever could. They carried no drama, no pleading, just quiet truth. He opened the door, stepping out into the wind. The cold bit through his clothes instantly. He crouched down, his voice softer now. "What's your name?" She hesitated, clutching the broken globe tighter. "Lila." "Lila," he repeated, as if the sound of it grounded him. "How long have you been out here?" She looked at the gas station across the road, its lights flickering weakly. "Since it got dark." Her voice cracked on the last word. Adrian's chest tightened. He looked around, no car, no woman, no one. Just the storm and this child who didn't belong in it. He took off his coat and gently draped it around her shoulders. She stared up at him, confused but too cold to resist. "There," he said quietly. "Better?" She nodded faintly, eyes dropping to the snow globe. The glass was fractured, one corner missing, but inside the tiny cabin and glittering flakes still shimmered faintly when she shook it. "She said if I shake it, it helps people find their way home," Lila murmured. Adrian swallowed, something heavy rising in his throat. He looked at the snow swirling around them, the endless white void. "Maybe it still can," he said. He opened the car door for her. "Come on, let's get warm. We'll find your mom together." For the first time, a flicker of trust crossed her eyes. She climbed into the seat, wrapping his coat around herself. As he started the engine, Adrian glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The tiny figure, the snow globe clutched in her lap, her gaze fixed on the storm beyond the glass. He didn't know it yet, but the moment he stopped for that little girl, the course of his life had shifted forever. Because somewhere out there, under the same storm, a truth waited that would tear open everything he thought he knew about guilt, fate, and what it means to come home. The diner was nearly empty, just the hum of an old jukebox and the low murmur of a coffee pot hissing behind the counter. Adrian held the door open as Lila stepped in, her tiny frame swallowed by his coat. The bell chimed overhead, and the warmth hit them both like a wave. For a moment, she just stood there, eyes wide, as if afraid the heat might vanish if she moved too fast. The waitress looked up from her notepad, ready to send them back out into the storm, until she saw the child. Her expression softened. "Poor thing," she muttered, grabbing 2 menus. Adrian guided Lila to a corner booth near the window. She slid into the seat cautiously, glancing at the door every few seconds, as though expecting someone to appear. "What would you like?" he asked gently. She shrugged, voice barely a whisper. Hot chocolate? Maybe. He ordered 2. When the steaming cups arrived, Lila stared at hers but didn't touch it right away. Her fingers hovered over the rim as though she was afraid she might break it too. Go ahead, Adrian said with a faint smile. It won't bite. She took a sip, flinched at the heat, then smiled. A small, fragile thing, like the glow of a candle in a dark room. For reasons he couldn't explain, it made his chest ache. Where did your mom go, Lila? She went to the factory, she said. By the river. She said she'd talk to someone and come back soon. Her small fingers traced the cracks in the snow globe resting on the table. But she didn't. The name Factory by the River sent a cold shiver through him. He knew those warehouses. His company owned 3 of them. His assistant had once mentioned reports of night shifts running illegally, despite safety shutdowns. He'd brushed it off, signing the clearance without a second glance. He swallowed hard. And she worked there? Lila nodded, still staring into the snow globe. Inside, the tiny white flakes settled around the miniature cabin, half buried in glittering dust. She said one day we'd have a house like that, with a roof that didn't leak and a window where we could see the stars. Adrian's throat tightened. He looked out at the blizzard raging beyond the glass. The street lamps had blurred into pale halos. Every flake that struck the window seemed to whisper the same thing. You could have stopped this. When Lila's eyes drooped, exhaustion pulling at her small frame, he signaled the waitress for a blanket. The woman returned with an old wool throw, and Adrian tucked it gently around Lila's shoulders. Her head tilted sideways, resting against the booth. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breath fogging the window beside her. Adrian sat there, staring at her sleeping face. Outside, the snow kept falling heavier now. His phone buzzed, his board calling again. He ignored it. For the first time in years, he didn't care about numbers or shareholders. Instead, his gaze drifted to the snow globe, its cracked glass catching the flicker of the diner's neon light. Inside, the little house glowed faintly, as if alive. He leaned back, whispering almost to himself, "We'll find her, Lila." But in the silence that followed, the voice inside him, the one he had buried beneath wealth and deals, spoke louder. "You're the reason she's gone." He rubbed his temples, trying to quiet the guilt, but it clung to him like the frost outside. Somewhere beyond that storm, a truth waited, one that would rip open the foundation of everything he'd built. And as the snow thickened, Adrian Hale, the man who had everything, realized he was about to lose the one thing he'd never known he had: his humanity. Outside, the storm raged harder, smearing the city into shadows. The diner's neon sign flickered through the fogged window, glowing red against the white curtain of snow. Adrian sat across from Lila, who slept curled beneath the blanket, her small hands still clutching the broken snow globe. The world around them blurred to a hum, rain against glass, wind through the vents, the soft rhythm of her breathing. He couldn't take his eyes off her. Something about that quiet innocence felt like a mirror held up to every wrong turn of his life. When the waitress came by, he paid the bill and asked if there was a motel nearby. 2 blocks up, but the road's closing fast, she said. You might want to stay till morning. He nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The word factory echoed like thunder inside his skull. He knew exactly where it was, the one near the river, the one the board had promised was temporarily shut down. He had signed that order himself. If Lila's mother had gone there, something was wrong. Very wrong. The snow howled as he lifted the girl gently into his arms. She stirred but didn't wake, her head resting against his shoulder. For a man used to giving orders from glass towers, the weight of a child felt foreign, fragile, terrifying, sacred. He opened the car door, set her carefully inside, and pulled the coat tighter around her. "Hang in there," he whispered. "We're going to find her." The drive to the riverfront was slow and treacherous. The windshield wipers struggled against the storm, and the streets were nearly empty, just the distant glow of the skyline behind him, swallowed by snow. As he neared the industrial district, the city's life drained away entirely. Streetlights flickered and died. Chain-link fences lined the road, each one frosted with ice. Then he saw it. The factory. Hale Textiles. The sign half buried in snow. His name. His legacy. The letters gleamed faintly under the street lamp like ghosts from another lifetime. He parked near the gate and stepped out. The wind cut through his clothes, slicing through his composure. The building was supposed to be abandoned, but a faint light pulsed behind one of the warehouse windows. He moved closer, boots crunching over ice. Beneath the noise of the storm, he heard something else. Machinery. Not much, but enough to make his stomach twist. He found a side door slightly ajar and slipped in. The air inside was heavy with oil and damp metal. Somewhere down the corridor, voices murmured. He crept closer until they became clear. She saw too much. They'll keep her quiet. A chill ran through him, sharper than the wind outside. He ducked behind a stack of crates, peering through the gap. Two men stood near the loading bay, one smoking, the other holding a clipboard. Between them lay a pile of torn papers, contracts, ledgers, pay stubs. Adrian's company name stamped across every page. Then he saw something small on the ground near the door, a scarf. Red, faded, the same shade as the mittens Lila wore. He froze. The world tilted for a moment. The scarf was soaked through, half frozen into the floor, but there was no mistaking it. It belonged to Lila's mother. The men's voices dropped to whispers. It's done. Dump site by the river. Nobody looks there in winter. Adrian's pulse thundered. Dump site. River. He didn't think. He ran. Out the door, through the storm, down the path toward the docks. The wind roared like an animal, and the cold bit into his lungs, but he didn't stop. Not when he saw the faint shape by the ice. Not when his hands went numb from clawing at it. Under the weak glow of a distant streetlight, something moved. A woman's arm, limp and pale, half buried beneath the frozen water. Adrian dropped to his knees. No, 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 he gasped, smashing at the ice with his bare hands until the glassy surface cracked open. He dragged her free, her hair heavy with frost, her pulse barely there. Stay with me, he begged, wrapping his coat around her. Your little girl's waiting. The storm howled in answer, and as sirens began to wail somewhere in the distance, Adrian Hale, billionaire, power broker, the man who thought nothing could touch him, realized that for the first time in his life, he was holding something he couldn't afford to lose. The ambulance lights sliced through the snow like fire, flashing red against the blank white streets. Paramedics rushed to meet Adrian at the edge of the dock, their shouts echoing over the frozen river. His coat clung to the woman's fragile body, her skin ghost pale, lips bluish from the cold. He couldn't feel his fingers anymore, but he didn't let go until they forced him to. She's got a pulse, one medic said quickly. Faint, but she's there. Adrian stepped back, chest heaving, his breath fogging in the frigid air. He watched them lift her onto the stretcher, hook V-lines, and cover her with thermal blankets. Somewhere beneath the sirens and chaos, he could still hear Lila's voice from the diner. She said she'd come back, but she didn't. Now she would. She had to. When they loaded her into the ambulance, Adrian climbed in without asking. The medic shot him a look, but didn't argue. Something in his expression made her pause. The billionaire who looked like he owned the world was trembling like a man afraid of losing it. The siren wailed as they tore through the snow-choked streets. Adrian sat by the stretcher, gripping the woman's hand through the foil blanket. Her name, he remembered suddenly. Lila Carter. The same last name she'd whispered earlier. He felt it pulse through him like a confession. At the hospital, everything blurred. Doctors shouting, machines beeping, gurneys rolling past. They wheeled Lila's mother through the swinging doors, leaving him in the corridor, drenched and shaking. His reflection in the glass looked like someone else entirely. A man stripped of power, haunted by a truth that hadn't even surfaced yet. He sank onto a bench, his thoughts spinning. The factory, the guards, the scarf. His company's name stamped across the papers. It wasn't just negligence, it was complicity. And for the first time in his life, Adrian didn't want to look away. A nurse approached, her expression cautious. "Sir, are you family?" He hesitated. "No," he said softly. "But her little girl. She's waiting." The nurse nodded, her voice gentler now. "She's lucky you found her when you did. Another hour out there?" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Adrian left the hospital just before dawn, the snow easing into a soft drizzle. The city glistened under the streetlights, quiet and washed clean, but he felt none of it. He drove back to the diner, his hand stiff on the wheel. Through the glass, he saw Lila still asleep in the corner booth, the waitress watching over her like a guardian. When he entered, the bell above the door jingled softly. The waitress smiled in relief. "You found her?" Adrian nodded. "She's alive. They're helping her now." Lila stirred at the sound of his voice. Her eyes blinked open, slow and dazed. "You came back," she whispered. He knelt beside her. "I told you I would." "Mom?" He managed a small smile, though his throat tightened around the words. "She's safe, sweetheart. She's going to be okay." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the cracked snow globe, pressing it into his hand. "You found her because of this," she said simply. It worked. Adrian looked at the tiny world inside, the miniature cabin, the falling glitter, and for a brief, impossible second, he believed her. Later that morning, as the sun broke, weakly over the skyline, he sat in the hospital corridor again, waiting outside the ICU. His assistant called 5 times. He ignored every one. All he could see was the faint rise and fall of the woman's chest through the window, the machine keeping time beside her. He thought of the boardrooms, the wealth, the endless pursuit of control. And then he thought of this woman, her daughter, and a factory bearing his name, the machine that had chewed them up to keep his world polished. The doctor emerged at last, exhaustion written across his face. "She's stable," he said. "You got her here just in time." Adrian closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "She's still unconscious, but she might hear you." Adrian stepped inside the room. The fluorescent light was unforgiving, washing the color from everything. Her face was bruised, her hands wrapped in gauze. Yet even in that fragility, there was something fierce, an echo of survival that felt larger than the body it inhabited. He pulled a chair closer, voice low and rough. "You don't know me," he began, "but I think I know who hurt you, and I think it's my fault." His words fell like stones in the sterile air. The monitor beeped steadily, as if listening. "I don't know why I stopped for your daughter tonight," he continued. "Maybe because I've spent my life building things that destroy people like you. Maybe because she reminded me what I lost when I stopped caring." He paused, staring at the snow melting on his sleeves. "But I swear to you, I'm not leaving this alone. Not again." Outside, dawn broke through the clouds, pale gold light spilling across the hospital's frost-covered windows. And somewhere beneath that light, in the quiet hum of machines, a faint sound emerged, a breath, a whisper, something fragile yet alive. Her fingers twitched. Adrian leaned forward, heart pounding as the woman's lips parted, barely moving. "Lila." He smiled through the blur of tears. "She's safe," he whispered. "She's waiting for you." And for the first time, in years, Adrian Hale felt something thaw inside him, something that had been frozen long before that night in the storm. Snow fell again that night, but softer this time. Less a storm, more a quiet surrender. Adrian sat by the window of the hospital's dimly lit waiting room, the world outside washed in white. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Board members, attorneys, the media. He didn't answer any of them. The man who once built empires out of words now had none left that could save him. Rachel Carter was alive, but fragile. Every time he looked at her through the glass, the machines whispering beside her, guilt tore a little deeper into him. She wasn't just another casualty of the system. She was the proof of what his empire had become. Rebecca, his longtime assistant, arrived near midnight, her expression a mix of disbelief and concern. "You've been here 3 days, Adrian," she said softly. "The press is starting to circle. They're asking why the CEO of Hale Industries is at a public hospital in the middle of a scandal." He turned toward her, his voice low. "Because this is where the truth is," she frowned. "What truth?" Adrian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a stack of damp papers he'd recovered from the factory. Contracts, payroll logs, falsified safety reports. "The kind that can destroy everything we built," he said, "and the kind I ignored until tonight." Rebecca scanned the top sheet, her face paling. "These signatures, they're yours." "I know," he said, "and they're forged. But that doesn't make me innocent. I let this happen. My father taught me to look the other way when it protected the company. I did that for years." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "If you release these, you'll lose everything." Adrian's gaze drifted back to the ICU window, where Rachel's small daughter now sat coloring quietly beside the bed. "Then, maybe it's time I did." The next morning, Adrian walked into his downtown headquarters. The building's mirrored walls reflected a man who no longer fit inside them. The lobby went silent as he entered. Employees watched, uncertain whether to greet him or hide. He called an emergency meeting with his board. The men and women who once feared him now whispered like vultures around a carcass. When he dropped the folder of evidence on the conference table, the room froze. These documents prove that Hale Industries funneled millions through fake safety audits and off-the-books labor contracts, he said evenly. "Our factories ran after hours. Our employees were threatened. People nearly died. One of them still might. And all of it happened under my name." "Adrian," one executive said sharply, "you can't bring this to light. The market will bury us. You'll bury yourself." He straightened, eyes colder than the snow outside. "Then let it." Silence followed, heavy as lead. That night, he sat in his office one last time. The city lights shimmered below like a sea of tiny fires. He opened his laptop and sent an encrypted email to a federal investigator. Every file, every ledger, every falsified signature attached. Then, with one steady breath, he typed the final line. "The truth belongs to those who paid the price for our silence." He hit send. When he stepped outside, the cold hit him hard, but he didn't flinch. Somewhere in the distance, sirens echoed again. Different ones this time. Not danger, but change. He drove back to the hospital, exhaustion written across every line of his face. Rachel was awake now, her voice weak but clear. "You look like you've been fighting ghosts," she said softly. "I have," he answered. "But not for long." "What did you do?" He smiled faintly, a shadow of the man he once was. "I told the truth." Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the streets, the city, and the empire he'd just set on fire. But for the first time in years, Adrian Hale didn't feel the cold. He felt clean. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and cold air. Reporters lined the marble steps outside, their cameras flashing like gunfire in the morning light. Inside, Adrian Hale sat at the defense table, his once immaculate suit now wrinkled from sleepless nights. The emblem on the wall, United States District Court, Northern Illinois, seemed to stare down at him like a judgment older than law itself. Across the aisle sat the executives who had once toasted him in penthouse meetings. They looked smaller now, their polished faces stripped of certainty. The federal agent Ward adjusted his glasses and nodded to Adrian. "When you're ready," he said quietly. Adrian stood. His voice, when it came, was steady. Too steady for a man about to set fire to the only world he'd ever known. He spoke for nearly 2 hours. He named every division that falsified safety audits, every partner that laundered wages, every hidden account. His father's name appeared again and again, etched into ledgers like a curse. When he finished, the room was silent. Even the judge seemed to pause before breathing again. From the gallery, Rachel watched with Lila in her lap. The girl's small hands clutched the repaired snow globe, the one Adrian had fixed the night before. Each time he faltered, she shook, it gently glitter-swirling like tiny constellations, reminding him there was still light somewhere above the storm. The cross-examination was brutal. Attorneys accused him of betrayal, insanity, ego. One of them leaned close and hissed, "You've destroyed your family name." Adrian met his eyes and said, "Then maybe it wasn't worth keeping." By the time court adjourned, headlines were already erupting across every screen. Hale Dynasty exposed. Billionaire turns whistleblower. Corporate reckoning in Chicago. Outside, microphones swarmed him, questions slicing through the cold. He ignored them all and looked only at Rachel and Lila waiting near the courthouse steps. The wind tangled Rachel's hair. Her face was pale but radiant with something he hadn't seen before. Peace. "You did it," she said softly. He shook his head. "We did." Lila reached for his hand. "Mom says you're the good kind of rich now." He laughed, the sound breaking the weight in his chest. "I don't know about rich," he said. "But maybe good is enough." That night, they sat together in the hospital cafeteria, long after visitors had left. The world outside buzzed with chaos, investigations, resignations, ruin. But inside, there was calm. Rachel placed a folded piece of paper on the table. "This came in the mail today," she said. It was a check, government-issued compensation from the settlement. She slid it toward him. "It's yours. Without you, none of this—" He pushed it back gently. "Keep it. Build something real with it. I've already started over." "What will you do now?" she asked. Adrian looked out the window, where snow drifted in lazy spirals under a streetlight. "Something my father never understood," he said. "I'm going to rebuild, but not for profit, for people." He wasn't lying. 2 weeks later, he signed over the last of his assets to a new organization, the Polaris Foundation, named after the star that had guided them through the storm. Its mission, to protect workers, rebuild lives, and shine light on the darkness corporate greed left behind. At the launch event, cameras flashed again, but this time Adrian didn't hide. Rachel stood beside him, Lila clinging to her hand. When a reporter asked why he'd chosen the name Polaris, he smiled faintly. "Because even in the coldest night," he said, "there's always one light that refuses to move." And as applause rippled through the hall, snow began to fall beyond the windows, soft, weightless, forgiving, like the city itself was finally exhaling. "You said—" Spring crept back into Chicago like a quiet apology. The city that had once drowned in snow now shimmered beneath pale sunlight. The river ran free again, carrying away the last fragments of winter's memory. On Elm Street, at the edge of a quiet neighborhood where no one knew his past, Adrian Hale stood on the porch of a small white house, listening to the sound of laughter spilling through the open window. Inside, Lila darted across the living room in socked feet, chasing a paper plane that looped wildly through the air. Her cheeks were flushed, her giggles bright. Rachel was painting by the window, brush in one hand, sunlight caught in her hair, the smell of coffee and turpentine filling the air. The house wasn't large, but it was alive in a way no mansion had ever been. Adrian leaned against the doorway, his sleeves rolled up, the faintest trace of paint on his fingers. "You're getting good at those," he said as Rachel added a streak of light to the canvas. She smiled without looking up. "You're the one who fixed the leaky roof. I finally have sunlight again. Seems like a fair trade." The painting showed a river half frozen, half thawing, a reflection of their story. Beneath the ice, light burst through in soft waves of gold and blue. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "It's not perfect," she answered, "but I think that's what makes it ours." He nodded, eyes drifting toward Lila, who was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully gluing the broken pieces of her old snow globe. It had taken weeks to find new glass for it, but she'd insisted on fixing it herself. "Mom says broken things just need someone to believe they can be whole again," she said proudly. Adrian knelt beside her. "Your mom's a smart woman," Lila grinned. "So are you." "You believe too." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "I just followed the light." Outside, the afternoon faded into soft orange. The air smelled of lilacs and wet soil. Rachel set her brush down and joined them on the porch. They sat together in the stillness, watching the horizon where the first stars began to appear. Lila pointed upward suddenly. "There it is!" Adrian followed her gaze. Through the thin evening clouds, one bright point shone above all others, the North Star. Polaris. Constant. Unwavering. "Do you think it followed us?" she asked. He smiled. "No, Lila, we followed it." Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice a whisper. "Do you ever miss who you were before?" Adrian took a long breath, watching the faint reflection of the star in her eyes. "No," he said finally, "because that man was lost. I think I've finally found home." Silence lingered, warm, unbroken. Inside, the clock ticked softly, the steady heartbeat of a life rebuilt. For the first time, Adrian didn't feel like an outsider looking in on someone else's happiness. This was his. Messy, fragile, real. Later that night, while the house slept, he sat at the small desk near the window, finishing a letter for the Foundation's next project. Its title read, Polaris Initiative, Rebuilding Lives from the Shadows of Power. His signature, once used to hide corruption, now sealed hope. As he looked up, the reflection of the North Star glimmered faintly on the glass. A memory flickered. Snow, headlights, a small barefoot girl whispering, "My mom said she'd come back." She had. And because of that, he had too. Adrian leaned back, closing his eyes, a quiet smile touching his face. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive in grand gestures or gold headlines. Sometimes it comes as a child's laughter, a woman's forgiveness, and a night sky that finally feels like home. Outside, the North Star burned steady, unchanged, eternal, guiding those still lost in the dark toward the place where their story begins again.